Um, Another part of this, and I've got just two more
Mm.
examples of the big shifts. One is I'm going to miss out Weber because we talked about rationality and irrationality, but it's linked to the last one, which is from deference to equality, because this was part of a wider movement which you'll know of, and I went through, for example, at the LSE in the student period in 1968, which is basically pulling down all hierarchy as much as you could. So um, class hierarchy, gender hierarchy, ethnic hierarchy. So we are all human, we're all equal, no one is better than anyone else. And that means, if you take it to its extreme, that no one has a better access to truth than anyone else. Your teachers tell you that, but why should you listen to your teachers? Older people tell you that, but why should you listen to older people? So basically, if you take concept of equality to its extreme, as many people pointed out, like Tocqueville in America, and have extreme equality, then it actually eradicates many other things, even liberty. Uh,
And presumably, this is particularly important in a class society, which is where modernity is substituted for caste systems. It's put in class, and if you then remove that mechanism, it's quite a big. You're eroding an awful lot of the stuff that actually makes the civilization hold together.
well, absolutely. I mean, there's a famous passage in Shakespeare about, you have to have some hierarchy, unloose that thread, and all harmony is lost, and so on. Because basically, in our social life, we have to have separations and rules that tell us who goes through the door first. Um, I mean, I related that example of people quarreling about who went into the dining halls of Cambridge colleges first. Was it the person who was first elected or the person who was senior, and so on? I mean, basically, you will have constant clashes unless you have some rule. If you're waiting in a queue or there's only one seat left, who decides? And if everyone is equal, as Hobbes famously pointed out, you just have a war of all against all. So you need some um, kind of ordering, and yet people chafe as soon as you say, one color is better than another color, one gender is better than another color, and one class is better than another color. People are going to say, no, why? And they're going to rebel against it. So
So,
we,
but it's quite interesting, though, isn't it? Because this notion, because there's a presumption of a kind of formal equality that makes the class system work. That the queen might be the queen, but if she breaks the law, we can still sue her for taxes or whatever. Whereas in different civilizations, there are different laws for different groups. Whereas so there's a kind of formal equality that is kind of sits in the background. It's when it gets pulled into the foreground, and then you start chafing against that, which then you lose everything, don't you? You everything kind of collapses into this kind of anarchic mess. It's almost as if it's fine as long as you don't notice it. Almost, you've got an equality, but don't do too much with that, and don't do too much with the other stuff either.
well, I think that is true. I mean, one of the differences is between equality of opportunity and equality, fixed equality. So
Mm.
if you were born unequal as a woman or in a caste system, no chance of moving from one to the other, then everyone would, or many people would say that's unacceptable. Our class system and our sporting system and everything is based on the idea that you start off with an
Mm.
equal chance, and you may end up unequal, but at least there's nothing inherently
Yeah.
unequal. And many people implicitly accept that in the class system as in games, because if you take that away, you make everyone equal, there's no point in life, particularly in a capitalist system, because what are you striving for? If everyone has the same view, brought a system whereby everyone had one car and one house and one this and one that, and we were all equal, life would just lose its point and be boring. So it is the striving after marginal gains, and the whole English class system particularly is a fairly good compromise because it allows a lot of mobility, gives a lot of purpose to many people's lives, it keeps the consumer market going, but it's not so overt and oppressive. And you feel that if people break the rules, I mean, you mentioned the Queen speeding, but obviously now there's questions about the Duke of York or someone,
Yeah.
and so on, who will be tried if he's found.
Yeah.
So basically, as long as you have rules which give most people an equality of opportunity and possibility, and then the hidden injury of that system is interesting, and I learned from one of the great experts on equality, my friend Andre Bataille, who is French Indian and has written many great books about caste. He said that, Alan, the problem with your system of class is that it's a double injury, because you're told that you have an equal chance, so that when you fail, in other words, if you don't succeed, not only have you failed, but it's your fault. What's great about the caste system, he says, is that it's not your fault, it's your karma. So no one's going to worry about basically being a sweeper or a latrine cleaner or a Brahmin. No one's going to say, you're a failed Brahmin because you're a latrine cleaner. That was your fate from birth. So instituted inequality, and it would even apply to gender. I mean, if you're given equal opportunities as a woman and you louse it up and you don't have a family life and you don't have children and you don't do this and you might feel you are a failed woman. You had the chances. And so we have a psychological pain caused by our open system of the kind which you don't have if it's absolutely fixed.
Now, just as a thing, you've been reading about the class system, haven't you? Was it
Yeah.
Sennett's book? Is this a good time for you to just reflect on
Well,
what you
I'll
read there?
just finish off this section because it sort of adds on
Okay.
to that,
Yeah.
which is what I was reading about, a book I should have read a long time ago, but is behind the theme we're talking about, which is Richard Sennett's The Hidden Injuries of Class, which I've got a copy of. I knew the idea and the title. And it's a very interesting book published in about 1973, in which Sennett, who is a very wide-ranging and sensitive sociologist, um, describes the sort of injuries I've just been talking about of the blue-collar workers in America who are told that they can achieve something and that America is a land of opportunity and uh, log cabin to White House stuff. And yet they end up without jobs or in terribly bad and boring and other jobs. And so they are given this promise, and then the promise is not delivered. And this is the hidden injury of class, because it's added to by the fact that many of them accept. They not only accept that they failed, but they accept self-image that they are told by people they respect above them that they have failed.
So is this the problem with meritocracy, really, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Um, so, their mentors and teachers and so on, they go through school and they fail and they're told they're second class.
Mm.
Um, I remember an incident when I was doing my finals at Oxford, and a friend of mine a couple of years ahead of me, who was very influential on me, he rather surprised me by saying, "Alan, don't worry too much about your final degrees. Just because you get a second class, it doesn't mean you're a second class person." And I thought, well, I never thought such a ridiculous thing. Anyway, uh, but there is that sort of built in that if
Yeah.
you don't. So basically, Sennett's book, but it's very restricted because he only talks about class. Um, Interestingly, he ends with a chapter about what we can do about it. And he shows that working class people have some imaginative um, escape worlds in their imaginations, whether it's art or poetry or just friendship and so on, which somewhat protects them against the full rigor of loss of self-esteem, which is what
That's really interesting because I'm as I've said before, next door there's builders working every day, very loud builders, and they're young men, Englishmen, and all they do throughout the day is chat, sing, and play music loud. And you kind of go, this is the enchanted world that they're living in. They seem very happy,
yeah,
much
yeah,
more happy than I was when I was working. I wasn't singing. And I was listening to Noel Gallagher of the Oasis, who's got a reputation as a bad boy and this kind of thing. But actually, with the lockdown, he says, all we want to do is sing. And there is this strand that is kind of not. It's kind of invisible, but it's kind of obvious that the working class and the blue collars, if you like, and the lower middle classes, what they do is they have these incredible enchanted worlds, especially around music. I mean, and it's poetry and music and this kind of stuff that they do every day, all the time.
yeah.
Uh,
And
it's
then
amazing.
at the weekends, it's football.
And football at the weekends, whereas whereas
So,
me in my coat, in
I mean,
my suit and
this
tie,
is,
is very locked down.
yeah, exactly. Well, this is the theme. I mean, your example is a very nice one because one of the things that struck me about working in a Himalayan village was that when there was no distinction between work
Yeah,
and socializing. And when the women went off into the forest, they sang to each other. When they went off in a work group, young men, young women, in the rice fields, very arduous, grueling work. But they spent their time chatting, joking, laughing, singing, and so on. So it wasn't alienated in a way.
and is
So
this something that you find also in the Japanese
yes,
culture more? Yeah,
well, I think I mentioned that the
yeah.
salary man in his office even, it's enchanted in different ways
Yeah.
than we would imagine.